Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking tonight about AI, artificial intelligence, and should we be scared of it or excited about it? And our guest is Sarah Baldeo, who is CEO and equity partner at ID Quotient Advisory, a boutique IT consulting firm founded in 2010. She specializes in artificial intelligence and digitization with government and financial services institutions. She's got 18 years of experience as a neuroscientist. She's a brain smarty guy and a technologist. She's worked in executive director and partner roles at Deloitte, CGI, and Ceridian, and was chief compliance officer at the Insurance Search Bureau. She was a 2023 40 Under 40 award winner and a 2023 TED speaker. She works to enable companies to extract value from legacy IT systems and to empower audiences with the knowledge on the neuroscience of resilience. The neuroscience of resilience. That sounds like a fascinating chat. Sarah Baldeo, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
So, should we be scared of AI?
I think at every turn of new technology, people are afraid. When the telephone was invented, people thought it was absolutely insane. When the car was invented and people stopped using horses, people were terrified. Should we be afraid? No. Is it normal for people to have fear whenever there's an inflection point of technology? Absolutely normal. And that's part of the work that I do, enabling and democratizing access to information around artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and really what does tech mean for the future?
What do you mean about democratizing access to technology?
Right now, there's a big debate around digital accessibility. So the way you and I are having a conversation right now is contingent on tech. If somebody doesn't have a laptop, if somebody doesn't have access to internet, I just came back 24 hours ago from Yellowknife. Certain communities don't have access to internet. They don't have access to the tools that they need. And democratizing access to technology means ensuring everybody can access the internet that they need, the tools that they need, and has the education to navigate technology so they can be part of the fifth industrial revolution.
The fifth industrial revolution.
That's what we're in the thick of right this minute.
Well, we may want to go back and review what the first four were just to put it in perspective. But, you say that people are understandably afraid, but they shouldn't be afraid. There was this letter that came out written by signed by a whole bunch of, senior people in technology companies that all said that we should be afraid and that we needed government regulation and that we should be scared of these robots. And, people did reviews with ChatGPT trying to tell them to divorce their wife and marry the ChatGPT and kill the world and blah, blah, blah. So why shouldn't we be afraid?
I think there's a lot of importance placed on responsible generative AI. But when people actually delve deep into understanding what generative AI models are, it's an algorithm. It's an algorithm that responds to what people feed it. So based on the prompts that you're feeding a generative model, ChatGPT is just one large language model. There's several others. You can look at BERT for Google. Based on what human beings do with generative AI models, that's how it responds. So regardless of the industry you're in, you're always going to need human beings to oversee what we do with artificial intelligence. Fear, I don't think is the answer. I think proper regulatory compliance models is the right answer, just like it was the right answer for decentralized credentialing and digital identity when we looked at the pandemic and this now very useless app that was built. It's really about the regulatory compliance laws. How do we build the right laws to ensure that people are enabled by artificial intelligence? You're always going to need people to oversee neural networks, deep learning models, broader artificial intelligence, and the kind of last concentric circle is that generative AI model that we're seeing. So I don't see the reason for people to be feared. And I think part of it is the lack of knowledge that people have access to if they don't have an IT background. They're not understanding what the infrastructure of AI looks like. So when I talk about giving better access, I think that's what's helping people to understand the implications of AI, as opposed to the admittedly, the fear mongering that's happening right now.
Okay, so let's try to break this down so we all understand a bit better. You've used a couple of terms I'd like you to explain if you could. You said deep learning models.
Yeah. So
What's
if you
that?
look at artificial intelligence, there's kind of this big circle of artificial intelligence. That's everything from Alexa to autonomous vehicles and everything in between. Within that bigger Venn, you can hear my super Alexa off. You can hear it responding to me. So within those four circles,
Is she listening to you and recording you and wondering what you're doing all the time? That's one thing people are worried about. Is Google and Alexa always listening?
That's part of the disclosure statement. So when you read your little selective disclosure statement in ChatGPT, it says you can consent to giving feedback to the model. You can also write back to OpenAI. There's a separate selective disclosure form that you can sign and say, I'm not going to give my proprietary personal data to contribute to this model. Most people don't know that. So if we look at those kind of four big circles, there's the big bucket of AI. The smaller bucket is like machine learning, also known as machine modeling. Then beneath that is neural networks. And then the smallest one is generative models. So when we look at machine learning, it's somebody, a data scientist, that's training a model based on usually labeled data. Generative models are not machine learning. It's not the same thing at all. It's essentially a model that is creating new text or new images based on the context that a human being provides to a generative model. So I genuinely believe that a lot of the fear that people have is, I'm a technologist. Admittedly, sometimes as technologists, we use all this verbiage and these complex lexicons, not to make anybody feel that they don't understand what we're talking about, but we're just trying to expediently keep up with conversing with other technologists. I think that the true answer for the future of where human and machine interaction is going is for people to actually understand what's going on in the background. And so with generative models, it's not a robot that's designed to take over your life. It's actually depending on the prompts that people give it. And the more people can train themselves on natural language processing, understanding the right prompts to give to ChatGPT or Bird by Google or Lambda or Palm, these are all different types of language models, the more power they're going to have in this equation of AI. That is my genuine belief about where the future is headed.
What's a neural network?
A neural network is really this concept of, picture your brain. You've got these neural synapses that are all firing every time you have a thought or an emotion or a feeling. A neural network is really a machine version of that, where you've got interconnected nodes that are transferring information and learning from each other in the same way your neural networks learn from each other. So that's what neural networks, or it's also referred to sometimes as deep learning models. But AI has been around, believe it or not, since 1956. So the first chat bot was created in 1966 in Germany. It was a tool called Eliza, and it was designed to emulate a therapist communication. So you would type an answer, for example, what are you feeling today? What is love? And it would respond to you. And this was in 1966 that this was being developed in Germany. So AI is not new. It's not new. It's not a new term. It's not something that just existed.
So if it's not new,
last year.
Why did it just take off with ChatGPT and lots of concern in the last couple of months?
I think in November 2022, what happened is OpenAI created a tool that made it accessible for every single person, regardless of whether they were a data scientist or a data engineer. It didn't take off just in November of last year. It was being utilized all over the world for citizen services. Banks were using it, government agencies were using it. Retailers were using it to track shopping trends and predictive analytics. All of those tools are artificial intelligence tools. Generative AI isn't even new because what I just described, this Eliza kind of virtual therapist, that was generative AI. It was looking at a question that it was being asked. It was looking at the contextual words that were being utilized by a user that typed it in, and it was giving you back a response, just like ChatGPT. And imagine how long ago. That was more than 40 years ago.
And they haven't taken over the world yet.
Sorry, what did you say, Brian?
And they haven't taken over the world yet, so we shouldn't be worried.
They haven't taken over the world yet. And I think, if anything, the fact that, this term of AI was created in the 1950s, it's not something that people should be terrified is going to take over their lives, or terrified that it's going to take over their jobs and people will be superfluous. I really think the true power that people have as human beings is learning how to use artificial intelligence to their benefit. So if I'm in finance and I get to the end of my fiscal year and I have to go through my income statement, my cash flow statement, and build out my fiscal plan for the next year, I can use AI for that. I can use predictive analytics for that. If I'm a doctor and I'm a neurosurgeon, which is the path that I was on before I switched over to technology, you can use a robot surgery assistant to help you. If you're an oncologist, there's an artificial intelligence tool that predicts with 12% more accuracy than a human oncologist the probability of cancer. So really the question I ask isn't, should we be afraid of it? It's, how can we use this so that we retain control and that we're utilizing it in the right context, regardless of what our industry, our profession, our career is, because that's the transformative power of artificial intelligence.
We're chatting tonight with Sarah Baldea. She is a neuroscientist and a technologist. We're chatting about artificial intelligence. We're going to take a break and come back in just 2 minutes with Sarah. We're going to have an interesting conversation tonight about technology, about digitization, about democratization, about fear, about the future. Stay with us, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I need artificial intelligence to correct my pronunciation. I apologize. We're chatting about artificial intelligence tonight. Our guest is Sarah Baldea. She is a neuroscientist, a technologist. She's a TED speaker, an actress, and an author. An actress and an author. She's got 18 years of experience in her field and is a keynote speaker across the world on some of the biggest stages. Sarah, you're a neuroscientist, a technologist, a TED speaker, an actress, and an author. How do you juggle all that?
I don't sleep very much, Brian, and I utilize artificial intelligence a lot in my life to automate as many tasks as possible. I'm also a single mom to a 12-year-old, so I definitely look to find where I can automate, outsource my tasks to technology wherever I can get some more time in my day.
A single mom too, on top of all that.
I am a proud single mom.
That's a big challenge. You were at Deloitte.
I was.
Some people have told me that AI, ChatGPT, are gonna get rid of all those first and second year Deloitte consultants or people like that, and the first and second year lawyers. That some of the rudimentary work that is done by the analysis type, consulting type, legal type people are all going to be done by artificial intelligence. Don't you think there's going to be some jobs that go away?
I do. I think there are going to be any jobs that can be automated in terms of repetition. So I'll give you an example. I won't mention which big consulting firm it was, but in one of my previous roles as a partner, I had a significant number of developers and programmers. If I look at Azure OpenAI as an example, I can create a SQL code generator or a Python code generator. These are different types of coding languages. I can utilize Azure OpenAI to write code for me. I used to be an application architect and developer, and I would spend a lot of hours writing code and then checking code. Did I enjoy writing code and checking code, or would I prefer to come up with the ideas and the workflows and the process automation concepts that I was going to launch into market and then have the code written for me? From my perspective, I could have utilized a lot of those hours. So the question is, are there going to be jobs lost? Unequivocally, yes. I challenge people to ask, and I asked this question 100 years ago, was there somebody that delivered my milk? Was there somebody that made candles? Was there somebody that did manual tasks that their jobs don't exist? And so when we talk about these industrial revolutions, the uncomfortable truth is every time there's an inflection point and there's new tech, there are jobs that are lost and there are new jobs that are created. The difference in 2023 and 2022 was that we had access to all of this media and all of this information and fear. And so people are accessing data at lightning speed, and not all of it is valid data. So over the years in history of humanity, there have been jobs that have been automated every single time. And so this instance now is really a similar situation where we're seeing that there are jobs that are repetitive, that are going to be automated, but there will be new jobs created. For example, we will need people who understand semantic processing, natural language processing. We will need even more data scientists and data engineers. We will need more UX designers. They're just going to use different tools than they did historically.
What's semantic processors?
So semantic processing, when you type in a question to ChatGPT, it's looking for context. It's looking for what is the sequence of words that you typed in. It's predicting what you meant, the context of what you meant. Have you asked it previous questions? That's what semantic processing and natural language processing is. And so that's how ChatGPT or BERT or Lambda come back and give you a response through semantic and natural language processing.
What made you decide to switch from being a neuroscientist to technology?
I finished my thesis work. I went into the lab at McMaster, and my parents were very proud that I was taking one of the acceptable paths in Jamaican culture, which is you can be a doctor or a lawyer. That's it. There are no other paths. And so I walked into the lab at Mac, and I had this moment of being absolutely certain that I would not be happy spending another 8 years in a research lab. And so I was fortunate to be scouted by a company that built risk model algorithms for Scotiabank. And the CEO was a very eccentric man, and he offered me a job, and he said, I have developers, I have programmers, but a neuroscientist is going to have some very key insights on the way people behave in fraudulent transactions with banks. I got to hire you. And he hired me. And that was now 19 years ago. And so that's why I transitioned from the path that I was on to become a neurosurgeon into being a technologist. And I've never looked back.
What was your thesis?
Very long thesis. It was measuring what's called mental attentional functionality in your cerebral cortex. That's a long way of saying, why do people pay attention to a limited number of tasks concurrently? And how can we make their brains more efficient?
I always thought it was based on focus. And so therefore, by focusing in on only a few things, you were more efficient. The people that think that they are multi-processing things are just fooling themselves and aren't paying attention.
There's a magic number. It's called Miller's magic number. And the scientific proof is you cannot concurrently pay attention to more than 5 to 7 items unless one of the items is something that you've automated. For example, when I drive home, I have memorized this path. I'm not really using my frontal cortex and my analytical decision making to drive home. It's just become this thing that I can do autonomously. So it doesn't necessarily decrease my mental processing power. So people can multitask, but there is a limit. Our brains are like a computer processor. And so I would say that people have different bandwidths, just like computers.
You've had a fascinating career. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered?
Uh, Definitely being a single mom. I got divorced almost exactly 10 years ago. So that was a huge challenge, very, very unexpected. And I think the work-life balance was something that was always being pushed upon me to really have that work-life balance. Uh, for me, I view challenges as opportunities. It sounds very cliche to say, but I really enjoy trying my very best to multitask and do as many things as possible. So divorce was a huge challenge. I am also a cancer survivor. When I was 25 years old, my doctor called me and said, and this is something people can listen to in my TED Talk, uh, oh, we found stage 4 cancer cells in your body, and they're very aggressive. And by just serendipitous nature of life, I was also pregnant at the time with my son. And so I was faced with a very difficult decision of having surgery right away or kind of just waiting and giving birth and then making that decision. My son will turn 13 next year, and it's 14 years now that I'm cancer free. So those are probably the two biggest challenges
and so is it unsafe to have cancer treatment while you're pregnant, I presume, therefore, you're saying?
It is. It is, yeah. It's a very high risk of ending your pregnancy if you do.
And so you waited.
I did, and I am proud to say I have an almost 13-year-old who will be 13 in November.
Fantastic. Well, and you've been cancer free, you say?
I have.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Work-life balance is an issue. Have you had other relationships? Do you date? Have you remarried?
I have a wonderfully supportive partner who is also an entrepreneur, also in consulting. We share a passion for investing. For a long time, I didn't date. I just didn't view it as a priority. My priorities were my son, myself, my career, and friends were somewhere in there where I could squeeze them in. My personality is I have a true passion for the work that I do, for building out that intersection between neuroscience and technology, for sharing when I can the obstacles that I've overcome and my approach to, you mentioned the neuroscience of resilience, really teaching people about this practice called neural programming. And so there hasn't necessarily been a lot of work-life balance over my career. When I was at Big Four consulting firms, I would work 18, 19 hours a day, but I really loved it, Brian. I genuinely felt passionate about what I was doing. On an average week, I usually am flying off to a number of different places, sometimes giving keynotes, sometimes consulting. And I just love what I do. And so it doesn't feel like work. It's that common axiom. If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
So have you had to change something about your work-life balance to have a successful relationship now, or did he have to adapt?
I was fortunate to meet someone who appreciated that I'm a workaholic. And there are times when he's a workaholic as well. And so I find that we just alternate. And sometimes we overlap. And when we overlap, because we both really feel connected to the work that we do and we love our businesses that we run, we're pretty understanding towards each other. So it took a long time to find someone like that and to find that alignment. but it was worth the wait.
We're chatting tonight about artificial intelligence, about a very smart lady who's a neuroscientist and now a technologist, and someone who's telling us a little bit about her career, about some of the challenges that she's gone through. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those challenges, about how she's dealt with them, about resilience, and also a little bit more about artificial intelligence and technology. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight about artificial intelligence. Our guest is Sarah Baldeo. She is a neuroscientist, a technologist, a TED speaker, an actress, and an author. We haven't talked about you being an actress. We got to come back to that too.
Yeah.
She's had 18 years of experience in her field. She shared with us some of her challenges. She's talked to us about work-life balance. We've talked about a lot of things. You said that your thesis was about resilience, and you sent me something which was about the neuroscience of change. Tell me about the neuroscience of change and resilience for humans.
So, Brian, in the past 2.5 million years, the brain has only grown by 30%. And all of that growth has happened in the decision-making part of your brain. That's the part of your brain that's logical, that's rational, that utilizes critical thinking. When we talk about change and the neuroscience of resilience, the instinct that most people have is when anything is a threat to them, it's perceived as if it was a threat to their physical safety. So thousands of years ago, if we encountered a lion or an earthquake or a volcano, we would have this fight or flight response. And what that would do is trigger your reptilian brain or your lizard brain. That's deep in the center of your brain. That's the part of your brain that has not changed at all in the past 2.5 million years. So when we think about the neuroscience of change, it's really, I encourage people to ask this question. What if, no matter what you encountered, no matter the chaos you experienced, you could react with logic and analytical thinking instead of panic by retraining your neural synapses? So instead of there's a layoff, there's job loss, there's cancer, there's divorce, there's this big fearful thing that happens to people. Instead of reacting with panic and using that lizard brain, that reptilian brain that hasn't changed, we can train our brains to rely on the frontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that's actually grown the most. And so I encourage people to go through this training exercise, which has 3 steps. And the 3 steps are basically a pause. It's beyond mindfulness. It's beyond meditation. It's really a pause where they're reflecting on what's happening to them at a biological level. I encourage people as a second step to say, build out a plan for how you're going to get from end to end, whatever happened to you, to the end of you surviving it. That encourages you to use your hippocampus, which is your memory center. And it's really the final step where you're visualizing end to end these new neural synapses. And so when people go through this training, I've interviewed thousands of survivors of cancer who have had experiences with war, who've had depression, anxiety, who've gone through various traumas in their life. When they practice this 3-stage step of neural reprogramming, they are more in control of their lives. And that is the neuroscience of change and the neuroscience of resilience. And I found in my research that it's applicable to any situation where a person feels threatened or their survival threatened, their livelihood, etc.
So when my mom told me to count to 10 and think before I respond, she was being a really smart neuroscientist.
She was giving you excellent motherly advice. You should always listen to your mother.
You should. You also said we should talk about, not that we should be fearful of the future, but what we need to be aware of and what we need to think about in regards to the future of AI and how it's going to change things. Tell me about that, if you could.
So when people are thinking about the future, there are 3 or 4 pillars that I encourage them to reflect on. One, there are different jobs that are going to be required in the future. We live in a planet that has had issues with a lack of resources for a long, long, long time. So we have a resource constraint issue. A lot of political scientists and economists are saying, well, we have a declining birth rate. And so I encourage this pause and ask oneself this question. We have a planet with a finite amount of resources. We have a declining birth rate. We have artificial intelligence that is automating jobs. And so when we think about these 3 pillars and we think about things like life expectancy has gone up. The science of nanorobotics and these kind of surgery, life prolonging surgeries that are happening, it begs the question, is this a positive alignment? Automation, people living longer, resource constraints with the planet, and a declining birth rate? It actually seems like a positive alignment between these pillars that I just articulated, that automation is going to require less human beings to do manual tasks. People are having less children, so we'll have less people. The Earth is struggling. It does have a finite amount of resources. We shall see how quickly we can terraform Mars. I don't think that's going to happen in an expedient way, no matter how much I like or dislike Elon Musk. I think, looking at other planets as a source of us being able to live and relocate to those planets, that's really far in the future. I'm not going to say it's unlikely or likely. But when we reflect on these 3 or 4 items, there is an alignment between them that does make sense as we think about the future. And the future, as a technologist and a futurist, I'm often asked to predict what's going to happen in 50 years or 100 years, as opposed to the next 5 years. And so from my perspective, there is a positive alignment between the declining birth rate and automation and finite amount of resources and artificial intelligence automating tasks that don't require critical thinking.
A Israeli author that I really quite like, I think it's Yuval Harari, wrote a book called Homo Deus. His first book, Sapiens, was about sort of the history of man, and then Homo Deus was sort of the future. And he was suggesting in the future there's going to be almost a new part of the human race that's going to be automation and robotics and bioengineering and rich humans. And he worries that people that won't be able to afford all of this extra technology and biomedicine, et cetera, are going to be lesser. And it's going to create 2 different classes. Are you familiar with the book and the thesis? And what do you think of it?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the book. There's another group of people called pronatalists, if you've heard of them. Pronatalists is a group of individuals that believe the people in the top, let's call it 1 to 2%, are the only people who should be procreating because they're the smartest, they have the greatest access to resources, they're going to raise the best human beings. I was born and raised in Rexdale, Toronto, which is not a very nice part of the city. I moved out when I was 18 and worked 3 jobs to put myself through school more than once. I do not agree with the theory that we need to drive further classism and this great divide. I do believe in accountability of human beings. My parents immigrated from Jamaica. They came to Toronto. I was born and raised in Toronto, and education has been at the foundation of what transforms my life and allows me to lead a privileged life. When I think about the future of humanity, I believe that the best type of technology is based on what's called OSS. This is open source systems. Open source systems means there's not a big global conglomerate that owns the intellectual property, that owns the code. it is free and available to everyone. And so when you build technology using open source systems, there are certain concerns that you might have in place for security and risk, but it's not relying on a huge conglomerate that has billions of dollars to give you access to that tech. And if you don't have money to pay for licenses, then you can't access it. And so I think the future of technology is removing a lot of these pillars of monetization. And so access to technology more and more and more, particularly if we look at Ontario as a province, that's why the Ontario Digital Service exists. That's why the Ministry of Innovation exists, because they're building out laws to ensure that companies cannot charge for access to these tools. If we look at ChatGPT, there's a free version and there's a paid version. It's true, not everybody has a cell phone, but I will say, Brian, I once did a research study with a huge government agency. It was actually during the pandemic. And I said, what would be the cost to make sure that every single Canadian citizen had access to a smartphone? Would that be cheaper than the administrative overhead and cost of all of these disparate agencies and paper processes? And it turned out to be 68% more cost effective to just give everybody a cell phone. And I do agree that everybody.
Why didn't we do it?
That's not good. That's not good politics, Brian. It's not the politics of cutting the administrative costs of our many different programs. I won't name any of the 4-letter word loan programs that existed. But if you cut all those administrative costs, people lose jobs. And that's not good optics for whoever is in power at the time. And so I think there's a lot of more complex reasons behind why these decisions are made beyond just, hey, that's most cost effective for the taxpayers' dollars that we have access to. And over the past 18 years in consulting, technology, and digital transformation, I can truthfully say that is a recurring issue that gets in the way of modernization and cost savings.
But we don't modernize, we don't automate because we're trying to save jobs, civil service jobs.
We're trying to save jobs. And also, I think a lot of politicians are looking to make sure they're not the one that's on the watch while these jobs are being lost or automated.
But then we have the ArriveCan app. We have the eHealth fiasco. We have example after example of when we try to automate and add technology, and it ends up being $1 billion boondoggle without great efficiency.
I have some insights on ArriveCan that I can't fully share because I signed NDAs. And obviously, some of the firms I worked at in the past. But one of the biggest issues in government automation is procurement. RFP, or request for proposal, is put out by a crown corporation or a government agency. The amount of money that it takes to write that document, to hire a company to write that document and give advice on that document, and then put it out to market, and all the big consulting firms bid on it. And then the procurement team goes through it for 3 months, 6 months, whatever period of time. And then they award it. And then the billable hours of the consulting companies skyrocket. That is the problem. It drives inefficiency. It sucks up taxpayers' dollars, and it is a recurring issue. Specifically, I see it in government, not so much in banks or financial services or insurance companies, but government institutions. Procurement is a money pit. And it continues to be a money pit. And we continue to spend $54 million on ArriveCan because of procurement, because of inflated billable hours. And I think until we build out guardrails to stop that and to hold consulting companies accountable, And I'm a CEO of a consulting firm. I'm the first person to say, if you cannot give me a solution in 3 sentences, you're probably going to overcharge me for the solution that you're trying to explain. Don't overcomplicate it for me. Tell me how you're going to solve my problem. Tell me how you're going to solve it in 3 to 6 months. Do not inflate a bunch of nice consulting hours with slide decks and animations that I can't do anything with. And so I think that's the crux of the issue that we keep seeing with accountability and where we spend taxpayers' dollars.
Sounds like we should do another show on government procurement of consulting services.
Yeah, it's a very friction-filled topic. I'm sure I have many people in consulting that would say, don't give away our secrets, but it's what we need to do to build a stronger, more stable Canada.
We're going to take a break, a final break, and come back with some concluding comments with Sarah Baldeo in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. This is an interesting conversation tonight. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Sarah Baldeo. She is a technologist, a neuroscientist, a speaker, an actress, an author. We haven't talked about your acting. Tell me when you acted.
I started acting when I was 19 years old to help pay for my very expensive neuroscience degree. And I will truthfully say I did not enjoy it. It was not a fun industry to be in when you're a 19-year-old. You have to work long hours, be on sets, wear things you don't like, be around people you don't like. You're just a blank canvas. And so I acted and I modeled while I was in university. And then I had my nice piece of paper, so I stopped. And a few years ago, a friend of mine said, would you like to get back into it? It's changed a lot. The industry has changed. The way women are treated has changed. And I said, why not? What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to hate it and then I'll leave. I don't need to just kind of do it to pay for tuition anymore. And so I started acting. So you might have seen me at the Wimbledon Open. One of my commercials was the Auto Trader commercial that aired for the Wimbledon Open. I have had a few small parts in Netflix shows, Amazon Prime shows, Showtime. I've done some work with some really cool UK brands. So at this point in my career, it's just fun. It's actually a fun, enjoyable thing to do.
Sarah, you spoke about growing up in Rexdale and that your parents are from Jamaica. A lot of people growing up in Rexdale with parents from Jamaica have not been successful and would criticize the educational system. You say the education system, or education at least, was the prime reason why you ended up being where you are. Why have you been a success? And so many other people would say that that Rexdale Jamaican parent background would not be a successful start to life.
From my perspective, Brian, we don't all start the race at the same place, but we do decide what we do on the race. And so I am a firm believer in accountability and ownership. I definitely grew up in a neighborhood when I was going to high school where I'd walk down the street and there would be gun violence, there would be drug trafficking. It was not a safe place for a teenage girl to grow up. We all make decisions, and I wouldn't cast aspersions on anyone else's decisions or the way that they reacted to their environment. I grew up with, I would say, very academically focused parents who said, you are going to have to work harder. You might have to work 10 times as hard or 100 times as hard, but there's nothing in your way. You're not a victim. You're not a victim of your environment, your circumstances, your socioeconomic status. You were born here and you have an opportunity to take advantage of education. And so you make your choice. Go out into the world, face whatever obstacles and hurdles that are going to be thrown at you, and make a decision. And so for me, even as a mother, I encourage my son, you have to take ownership of what you choose to do. Life is very unlikely to be rosy. And so if you head into it with a victim mindset, it's going to do you a great disservice. And I've been asked many times, how did I break the glass ceiling? And my response is the same. I never realized there was one. I never paid attention. In high school, my teachers would always say, you don't seem to think there are limitations on what you're going to do and what you're going to achieve or how many things you can be good at. And I said, well, why should there be? The only limitation is me believing there is a limitation. And so I've never believed there was a glass ceiling in front of me. I come from very diverse background. I have a Russian stepmother, an Italian stepfather. My son is half Portuguese. We're very mixed. We all come from different backgrounds. And so I don't believe that I ever was a victim. And I refuse to be a victim of my environment. If anything, I believe that that was something to take strength from. If I could survive that, I've always believed if I could survive cancer, or if I could survive divorce, or I could survive growing up in a really hard neighborhood, what is to stop me other than myself?
That's a great way to end the show. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. It's been great.
Sarah Baldeo, a neuroscientist, a technologist, a speaker, actress, and author. If people want to follow you, do you have a social media platform that you encourage us to check out? How do you want to be followed?
I do. They can find me on Instagram at life_via_Sarah. They can check out my website, which is www.sarahbaldeo.com. Look me up on LinkedIn. I do quite a lot of mentorship and coaching work. I always encourage people to reach out to me. I don't have a lot of time, but I try as much as I can to give time to people that want help and they want to change the direction of their life to do something fantastic.
Thanks for joining us. That's our show for tonight, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Yellowknife, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.